Hi friends, it's Friday. I'm excited about seeing you today on our Zoom at 1:30. I'm going to keep reading Roz and Bright Bill. Yesterday they were starting to kind of having to go through towns, and looks like they're going to have to go through some cities to be able to get to the island. So we're going to start with chapter 67, which is called The Town. Okay. Pookie was a big little dog. Her body was round, her legs were short, her ears were long. Although the dog looked funny, she was serious about protecting her home. She slapped her front paws on the windowsill and stared into the night to make sure all was well outside. But all was not well. A new clump of weeds had mysteriously sprouted in the yard. Pookie needed to take a closer look. The dog whined by the back door until someone let her out. Then she scurried across the porch, down the steps, and over to the mysterious weeds. As Pookie approached, a raspy growl sounded in her throat. "Where did these weeds come from?" she said to herself, sniffing. "They weren't here this afternoon." The weeds rustled in the breeze, and that was enough to set Pookie off. The dog barked and barked and barked, and then astonishingly, the weeds spoke to her in a clear voice. "I'm sorry if I disturbed you," said the weeds. Pookie stopped barking. "I was hoping to pass through without being seen," said the weeds, "but you saw me. You are a very good guard dog." Pookie resumed barking. "No, no, no, shh," said the weeds. "Please stop barking." But there was no stopping Pookie. The clump of weeds decided to move. Like some sort of monster, the weeds rose up on two legs and leaped over the fence into the neighboring yard. Felix had heard Pookie barking next door, and when the weedy monster landed in his yard, he started barking as well. So the monster kept going, leaping fences from one yard to the next. Every house in the neighborhood seemed to have a dog, and they all began barking about the weedy monster. Reader, you and I know the monster was actually a robot in disguise, but the dogs never did figure out what happened that night. Roz finally slunk into the shadows behind a school building and listened as the chorus of dogs started to settle down. "That didn't go very well," said the goose as he landed beside his mother. "No, it did not," said the robot. "This will only be tougher in daylight." "I know, we will have to try something else." Early the next morning, the sun started rising, automobiles started driving, robots started running errands. However, one of those robots was not like the rest. Roz had picked every speck of dirt from her body, and now she blended in with the normal robots going about their normal morning routines. Our robot was hiding in plain sight. Roz marched through town, turning left and right down the streets, as Bright Bill watched from above. Along the way, she passed a wide variety of robots, all going about their business. There was even another Rosum robot marching around who looked identical to our Roz, except she was shinier and had a different unit number. It occurred to Rosum Unit 7134 that if anyone noticed her unit number, it might bring a swift response from the Recos. But as she continued past houses and shops and humans and robots, I lost my place. But as she continued past houses and shops and humans and robots, they didn't seem to be in any danger. Everything was going smoothly until she heard an airship flying toward the town. Our robot felt something like dread as she waited for a sleek white ship to appear. If the Recos found her now, there would be no escape. But the ship that appeared wasn't white, it was black, and it flew over without stopping. Roz was safe, and suddenly she was dreaming about airships. Returning to the island would be so easy with a ship. She and Bright Bill would climb in, fire up the engines, and be home in no time at all. But it was an impossible dream. There was no safe way for our robot to get an airship. She had to find some other way home. First, she had to find her way out of this town. So Roz focused on her surroundings and continued marching along the sidewalks just like a normal robot. Chapter 68, The Station. At the end of town where the houses stopped and the countryside began, there was a small train station. Two platforms sat on either side of the tracks. Humans and robots were standing around waiting for the next train to arrive. Nobody paid any attention to our robot as she calmly marched past. When Roz was safely out of sight, she slipped into the woods where Bright Bill was hiding. The goose opened his mouth to speak, but the station bell started ringing. Speeding down the tracks was a passenger train. A whistle blew, the train gently braked, and a minute later it came to a smooth stop at the station. Passengers burst out of the train cars while others stepped aboard. The first 9 cars were reserved for humans and had wide windows and comfortable seats. The only robots allowed in those cars were service robots, who brought food and drinks to the human passengers. All the other robots were confined to the windowless car at the end of the train. "Where's it going?" whispered Brightbill as he peeked out from the brush. "The sign says this is the express train to the city," whispered Roz. The goose turned to his mother. "We have to go past the city to get home. This train could save us a lot of time. We should hop on." The robot turned to her son. "I do not think that is a good idea. It is too risky." "Ma, I watched you walk through the town and nobody even noticed you. We'll be fine. Let's follow those robots into the last car. I'll find a hiding spot and we'll be at the city before you know it." Roz had questions. "How large is the city? Do you know where to go? What if we get lost?" "Relax, Ma. My pigeon friend Graybeak lives there. She'll be happy to help us." A voice called out from the loudspeaker, and the last couple of passengers hurried along the platform. "I'm going to check it out," said Brightbill. With a quick flurry of wing beats, he fluttered out from the brush and onto the roof of the last train car. The goose lowered his long neck and looked through the open door. Then he looked back and waved for his mother to join him. A whistle blew, and Brightbill waved faster. Roz had little choice, so she slipped out of the trees and marched onto the platform. "In here, Ma!" Brightbill pointed down to the doorway beneath him. Everything about this situation made our robot nervous. Her survival instincts were tingling. Roz looked up at her son on the roof, and then she stepped through the train door. But before Brightbill could flutter in behind her, the door slid closed, and the train began to move. Chapter 69, The Train. Our robot felt something like panic as the train pulled away from the station. She wanted to break down the door, leap from the train, and find her son. But what could Roz do? She had to act like a normal robot. She had to pretend that nothing was wrong. The train's car interior was a long, windowless room filled with rows and rows of robots. The robots were all facing forward, all standing still. All facing forward and all standing still. If not for their softly glowing eyes, you might think they were statues. Some of the robots were perfect and new, but most had scrapes and dents. None more than Rosm Unit 7134. Roz walked down the aisle and stood in the last row, and the train started to accelerate. Faster and faster it went until it reached its cruising speed. Then it hummed along the tracks, occasionally swinging left or right as it snaked around a curve. With no windows, Roz could only wonder how far she was traveling. She could only wonder about the scenery outside. Mostly she wondered about her son. Was Brightbill okay? How would she find him? Would they ever see each other again? Of course they would. Brightbill was smart and resourceful. The goose would simply follow the train tracks into the city. Then he would find his pigeon friend Graybeak, and she would help them reunite. Roz just had to stay out of trouble. Time crawled by. The robots gently swayed with the motion of the train. Finally, there was an announcement from the loudspeaker. "Next and final stop, Center City Station." A whistle blew, and the train braked and slowed and came to a smooth stop. The door slid open, and the robots filed out. And there's the train. Chapter 70, The March Through the City. The main hall of the Center City Station was enormous. Wide columns stretched up to an arched ceiling. A huge electronic screen flickered with train schedules. The whole place was bustling with humans and robots, and everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. Everyone except Roz. There was our robot, standing still in the station while commuters hurried past. She was quickly trying to calculate her next move, and she had to think quickly. You see, a normal robot would never loiter there for long. Roz needed to do something, anything, and when a crew of Rosm robots marched past in a single file, she could think of no better plan than to join the end of the line and pretend to be one of them. She followed the crew through a set of doors, and suddenly they were outside. The city was a blur of activity. Automobiles hummed down the streets, robots marched along the sidewalks, humans talked and laughed and shouted. Buildings towered overhead, and above them, airships buzzed across the sky. Airships. For a moment, Roz was dreaming again about how easily she could get home with an airship, but reality came crashing back when a white triangular ship darted over. It was gone in an instant, disappearing behind the rooftops, but that was all it took for the robot's survival instincts to flare. Were the Recos searching for Roz or going about some other business? Roz tried to focus on her immediate surroundings. She was still marching behind that crew of robots. With each step, she grew more nervous than they noticed her tagging along. She wanted to break away. And as they started weaving and shuffling through a crowd of tourists, Roz slowed and stopped, and the robot crew continued on without her. Now Roz was on her own, but she didn't know what to do or where to go. When in doubt, Brightbill had always guided her north, so our robot set off through the city in that direction. While marching northward, Roz passed beautiful boulevards and architecture and gardens and art, and yet she had to ignore it all. She had to act like a normal robot, and a normal robot would never wander the city admiring beautiful things. Wherever Roz looked, she saw normal robots concentrating on their tasks and nothing else. They ran errands, delivered food, swept sidewalks, cleaned windows, fixed machines, built glorious structures, and did more jobs than you can possibly imagine. Most walked on 2 legs, but some rolled on wheels or slid up and down the sides of buildings on tracks. The city was a glittering modern metropolis, where humans lived in luxury, all thanks to the tireless work of robots. Roz was marching when the sunlight faded and the city lights brightened. She was marching when the humans went in for the night and the robots continued to work. She was marching when the sun came up and the humans filtered out of their buildings. A new day began in the city, and there was Roz, marching north, blending in, anxiously hoping her son would appear. Chapter 71, The Observations. Sunlight sparkled off the skyline. New buildings were constructed. Old buildings were taken down. Cargo ships docked in the harbor. Delivery trucks unloaded crates. Bright signs flickered with advertisements. Robots worked behind the scenes. Children played in parks. Adults ate and drank at outdoor cafes. The city pulsed with energy. A wild robot observed it all. The last chapter we're going to read is chapter 72. It's called The Police. A pair of police robots stood on the sidewalk while foot traffic glided past them. Their heads swiveled back and forth as they scanned the crowd with their glowing eyes. The police looked menacing, but they sounded friendly. Whenever a human walked by, they'd say, "Have a nice day," in a perky voice. There were a lot of humans walking by, so the police kept repeating their words. Have a nice day, have a nice day, have a nice day. Our robot was not having a nice day. She was alone in the city. She was worried about her son, and she wanted nothing to do with the police. But she couldn't avoid them. If she turned suddenly, she might draw their attention, so she kept her eyes forward and calmly marched along with the other robots on the street. Roz may have looked calm on the outside, but on the inside her thoughts were scrambled. Were the police dangerous? Did they work with the recos? Was she about to be caught? It seemed as if the police were watching Roz. Their eyes lingered on her for a second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and then they continued scanning the crowd. A robot felt something like relief when she made it past without incident. She went on her way, just another robot on the street, and those perky voices gradually faded behind her. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. Have a nice day. And on that note, Maddox, we are going to start on Monday with the pigeons. Now, you don't have school Monday, technically, because it's Memorial Day, but I am not assigning you work on Monday, but I will read a portion of The Wild Robot. So on Monday, all you have to do is just listen to The Wild Robot, okay? And that's all. I hope you have a really nice weekend. I will see you all Tuesday if your parents are coming to pick up your things at school, and I look forward to hopefully being able to say hi to some of you that day. Okay? Have a wonderful weekend. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.